Welcome, and thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Bonnie Blair Lacey, and I'm the Gene Jones Education and Public Programs Manager here at the museum. Today, I'm so pleased to welcome Emma Wynn, the President of the Nevada Native Plant Society. Today's program is in conjunction with the exhibition we have on view called Into the Time Horizon, which explores themes about how artists experience the environment throughout the world, especially in this time of climate change and global challenges. Every month during the run of the exhibition on the second Friday, we have a program from a local conservation or environmentally active organization, so like the Nevada Native Plant Society. So if you're interested in this topic, you can join us every month for a different local organization. Coming from a long-standing passion for botanical sciences, Emma Wynn is originally from England. She brought her fascination with plants first to the Indiana Native Plant Society and was delighted by the rich diversity of plants in the Great Basin, especially subalpine species. She passionately leads the Nevada Native Plant Society, which just celebrated their 50-year anniversary last year, and this is her third year as president. She also nourishes her own secret native plant garden in her backyard off of Mount Rose Highway. Please join me in welcoming Emma to the stage.
Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you to the Art Museum for inviting the Nevada Native Plant Society here to talk about the wonderful flora of Nevada and what we do to engage people within that flora. Our logo is the giant blazing star, and we've had this since 1976. It's been on our newsletter headings and logo for any letters and different things we send. They originally had a competition in 1975 to get a logo, and it's gorgeous. We stick with it. So Mentzelia laevicornis, or giant blazing star. Many people think Nevada's just the great empty, or a barren, dusty desert. From Mark Twain onwards, people have been saying, well, there's nothing there. But we're not a barren waste of sand. Despite being the driest state in the Union, we're averaging 9 inches of precipitation in our valleys and deserts. We have several assets that are going to contribute to a relatively rich floral diversity. We're the 7th largest state in the Union, over 110,000 square miles and a significant latitudinal extent. We have 314 named mountain ranges, which means we have a vast elevation range within the state from a low point at 481 feet to over 13,000 feet on the top of some of the mountains. Our geology, we have very rich and varied geology. These are the incandescent rocks out by Sutcliffe. In fact, we're having a field trip out there in a couple of weeks. This geology also helps contribute to this varied flora. We have 3,647 plus different plant taxa. Plant taxa means it includes species and varieties. Over 3,000 of them are native plants. The others are introduced and naturalized plants. And we have 133 plants that are endemic to Nevada, that only grow in Nevada. This map shows some of our ecoregions. Let me find my pointer. The majority of Nevada is in the Great Basin. But we, in Reno, are lucky enough to live close to the Sierra Nevada. And if you go down south, you're in the Mojave. The plant habitats throughout the state include desert shrubland, sagebrush steppe, pinyon juniper, and mountain mahogany woodlands, rivers, creeks, lakes, and associated wetlands, coniferous forests, alpine meadows, and alpine fell fields. Alpine fell fields are those areas above the tree line. And I'm going to look now just briefly at some of the areas. So Great Basin, Reno section. We're dominated by abundant drought-tolerant sagebrush. And here we have the flowers of sagebrush. And sagebrush, Artemisia tridentata, is our state plant. It's been our state flower, rather. It's been our state flower since 1917. Other shrubs in the desert, we've got desert peach, which has more or less gone over unless you go really high up, bitterbrush, mountain mahogany, all sorts of cool shrubs. We do have some trees in the area. They're mainly along the wetlands. You'll find aspen, alder, willows and things along creeks and wet areas. Grasses, perennial grasses and bunch grasses are very important in this area, providing habitat and cover for animals. And this is ricegrass, or Indian ricegrass. This is our state grass. It was designated in 1977, and it was chosen because of the importance of a food source to native Nevadans. In addition to shrubs and grasses, we have a lot of different wildflowers. Things like, I put in paintbrush because people love paintbrush with its colorful bracts. Also, things like penstemon, lots of sunflower family plants like mule ears and arrowroot. We have buckwheats, rabbitbrush, all sorts of different things, and many small annuals if you go out into the sagebrush. Again, we're lucky to be able to access the Sierra Nevada region. Now, we are on the eastern slope of the mountain range, which means we are a lot drier than the California side. There's a lot more trees, so in the high elevation ecosystems, we get coniferous forests, wildflower meadows, and then, of course, the areas above the tree line. So here we've got our gentle Jeffrey. And if any of you have been up close with a Jeffrey in warm weather, smell the bark. Smells of vanilla. And some people say pineapple, but I think vanilla. Other trees can include lodgepole pines, red fir, white pine, and more. I love the wet meadows. This is an alpine shooting star. But we have wet meadows. I'm lucky enough to live on Mount Rose Highway, so I will often pop up to the meadows. Particularly, I'm fond of the interpretive loop on Mount Rose. And once the snow melts, there's a parade of wildflowers, starting with buttercups and marsh marigolds and ending with asters. And in addition to the wildflowers, up in the meadows, there are also a lot of grasses, or say the pretty wildflowers, because grasses and sedges do also flower, and they are an important part of the ecosystem. Once you get above the tree line, things thin out a little bit, and you can be walking up. This photo of the buckwheat was taken on the access road going up to the radio towers on Slide Mountain. And you go up above the tree line, and things spread out, and you're kind of thinking, the first time I went up, I was thinking, am I on the right road? Am I finding the right place? And then you get these plants that are so tenacious. You know, they're growing on granitic walls, slopes, and gorgeous with these bunches of little pink flowers hanging down like lollipops off these gorgeous grey-green leaves. And a variety of other plants, subalpine plants, that you can find at higher elevations. I had to include the snow plant. So many people love the snow plant, and it's so cool. Once it's seen, never forgotten. I chose to use common names in this presentation because sometimes people get put off by binomials. But the snow plant, which apparently its common name is because it comes up fairly soon after the snow, its binomial or Latin name is much more fun than its common name. The Latin name is Sarcodes sanguinea, which loosely translates to fleshy, bloody body. And with that red, it's a nice red flower. Only a flower. This is an interesting plant because it doesn't photosynthesize. It's not a direct parasite. It's what it does is its roots connect with mycorrhizae. Those are the fungal threads, and those fungal threads then connect with coniferous plants, and it gets its nutrients from coniferous plants. So all it does is produce a flower, and if pollination occurs, then it's going to produce fruits. No leaves, doesn't do any work for feeding itself anyway. And if you go down south, you get to the Mojave. And this climate there is characterized by very extreme variations in daily temperatures, very hot, dry summers, and it was very hot in March too when I was down there, frequent winter frosts, and an average annual precipitation of somewhere between 2 and 6 inches. I went down there for the first time this year, partly because it was a good season. There had been some nice rains in the fall and through the winter, so there were a lot of plants to see. Some of the iconic species are things like the Joshua tree, the creosote bush and other shrubs, and of course cacti. Now, the Joshua tree, apparently it got its name from 19th century Mormons who thought that the outstretched branches of the tree, outstretched limbs of the tree, of the plant, it's because it's not a tree, the plant, was like Joshua leading them west. So that's how it got its common name. In addition to the shrubs and cacti, there's a variety of perennial and annual plants. And I was lucky enough to see all of these this spring. One of the plants I keep a list of plants I want to see, which is probably not surprising, and I've always wanted to see lilac sunbonnet. I'd seen photos of it, I'd read about it, but I'd never looked up its dimensions and couldn't believe how little it is. Of course, being small is an advantage when you're in a desert environment because it means you haven't got to produce masses and masses of stuff. You just produce enough leaves to have enough energy to make flowers and fruits. The desert rock nettle is gorgeous. It is a perennial plant, so it's going to have ways of surviving the drier years and then flower and fruit in the good years. But so with the stats I've given you and a little glimpse into our floral diversity, I think you can agree we did need a native plant society. And the Native Plant Society was founded in 1975, so 50 years ago last year. Our purpose then, and our purpose now, is to stimulate an interest in and appreciation of our native plants, and thereby hopefully help with their preservation. When it was the Young Plant Society, when it was formed, the native Nevada's plants had been under-collected by taxonomists. You know, people were just thinking, well, there's nothing there, it's just sagebrush and dust and sand. So one of the things that the Young Plant Society wanted to do, and I'm going to read it, was a major undertaking of society members is a plant inventory from which rare and endangered species can be determined. The knowledge gained thereby will be shared with the public and those governmental bodies charged with the preservation of the state's heritage. So early on, people were out there collecting plants and, making an inventory of our native plants. These are two of our founding members. One of them's in the room today. Thank you, Jerry, for coming. The force behind the society was Margaret Williams. She's a native Nevadan. She grew up in Smith Valley. And she wasn't a plant professional. She was a teacher and a very keen gardener. And she loved the cushion plants, the little moundy plants. Her passion for gardening led her to join groups such as the California Horticultural Society and the Alpine Plant Society. And through these organizations, she met many fellow gardeners and plant collectors. The people she met and the articles she read had a profound effect on her. And again, I'm going to read a quote by her. It was through accounts of Rupert Barnaby's travels with Dwight Ripley, plant hunting in the Great Basin, written for the Alpine Garden Society Bulletin of Great Britain, that I became aware of our fascinating native plants. Dwight Ripley described these plants so vividly, and Rupert Barnaby photographed them with such clarity that I felt I had to see them for myself and attempt to establish them in my garden. Had it not been for them, we might have been living in a condominium and growing geraniums in pots on the balcony instead of growing native plants on a rocky hillside. And we might not have had a native plant society. So Margaret was a member of the California Native Plant Society from its early days. And in 1975, she decided it was time for us to have one. So she put together a planning committee and got the ball rolling. The first meeting was held on April 17th, 1975, with 40 people attending. The first field trip was on May 3rd, and the first newsletter was also published in May. They got off to a flying start. So Arnold team, known as Jerry, and I can't call him Arnold. I volunteer for him and say he's definitely Jerry to me. And I checked that it's okay to call him Jerry in this talk. So Jerry was part of the planning committee. He'd met Margaret the previous year. He'd met her in June 1974. And he was a new graduate. He had 1 semester of botany under his belt, but a thirst to learn more. And it was the first of that field trip in 1974 was the first of many field trips he went on with Margaret and other botanists. And he hasn't stopped traversing the state and collecting and recording its native plants. This thirst for knowledge and love of Nevada's native plants led to the publication of this book last year. This book is the result of over 50 years of collecting and exploring by Jerry and 40 plus years of collecting and photographing by Jan Nacklinger. It's the first comprehensive accounting of all the native and naturalized plants in Nevada. Every single plant in this checklist has a corresponding herbarium voucher specimen, so we know they've been found here. And the book also lists where they're found by county and region. And it's a really cool book. I use it quite a bit, even for when I'm making Plant of the Week posts for our Native Plant Society Facebook page. On an interesting note, nearly half of the specimens in UNR's herbarium have been collected by Jerry. And this list has already been added to, actually. A couple of more have been discovered as people, but it will be added to over the years. But it's not a major focus for the Native Plant Society anymore because we have new challenges. A US Department of the Interior study found that the average American child can identify 1,000 corporate logos, but can't identify 10 plants and animals native to his or her hometown. Now, I will admit I couldn't find the original study. Also, it's a bit of a false equivalence because logos are designed to catch our attention and be memorable, whereas plants are just minding their own business and getting on with living. Now, all of the plants in this array can be found in Nevada. And I'm sure some of you, I saw some people saying, well, know what they are. How many? Hands up if you know what the names of these plants are. Oh, good. Some people do. Let's see. So, this is the white bog orchid. This photo was actually taken Mount Rose Ski. I go up and it's near the main lodge. There's all sorts of wet areas if you go there in the summer, and that's where that was taken. It is one of 14 native orchids that we have in Nevada. Hawaii only has 3 native orchids. We don't want to brag, but we have 14. Mariposa lilies. I love finding these. I can't remember where that photo was taken, but they can be found all over the place. They can be found in disturbed sites, Hidden Valley. Last year, I stopped my car on Thomas Creek Road and was looking in the natural areas on the side of the road and found masses of them there. It was a good year for them. And these are great pollinator plants. So fun seeing which insects are in these plants. Rabbit brush. Rabbit brush gets a bad rap. But, no, don't blame it. It is a mild allergen, but this is an insect-pollinated plant. It puts energy into producing the petals to attract the insects, the nectar for the insect, and its pollen is relatively heavy, and it doesn't produce masses of pollen. Its pollen is going to stick onto those insects. Flowering at the same time of this is sagebrush. You probably don't know what sagebrush flowers look like unless you remember the picture I showed earlier, because they are insignificant, because it is wind-pollinated. It doesn't need to make pretty petals and nectar. It produces masses and masses of tiny pollen grains because they're just thrown out into the air to find the female flower. So while rabbit brush is a minor allergen, the major allergen in the fall is sagebrush. Flatbud prickly poppy. This photo was taken in the Arrow Creek open space area a couple of years after the fire that was there. And in fact, you can see, look at some burnt twigs in the background. This plant, you'll see in disturbed areas. I see it in empty lots where I live. I see it along the roadside. Gorgeous with its crinkly white petals. And finally, bitterroot. I chose bitterroot to go into the museum's calendar because finding this delicate flower with it has white, sometimes pinky white petals, and it's gorgeous anthers and inside. It growing in these rocky, sandy areas is just such a delight. Its leaves come out early, and its leaves have died back before the flowers come out. It's also an interesting plant, and I am going to read from my notes so I make sure I don't make mistakes. But bitterroot is a culturally significant plant for several American tribes in the West. Traditionally, the roots were gathered, dried for storage, and used for food or trade. And they are bitter, as the common name suggests, but if you mix them with berries or meats or other flavorings, they were very nutritious. Now, Meriwether Lewis of Lewis and Clark first collected this plant for science in July of 1806. And the area where he gathered it, I think, is called Bitterroot Valley or Bitterroot, anyway, in Montana. But he collected it in 1806, and he gave his specimens to the botanist Frederick Persh when he returned to Philadelphia. Now, Persh named the plant, so its binomial name is Lewisia, the genus name for Meriwether Lewis, and the species is rediviva, or rediviva, however you like to say it, from the Latin word meaning reviving from a dry state, because this plant can get dry, be put in storage. If it gets wet, it will come back to life. And actually, that's what happened to the specimen presented to Persh, much to the amazement of those at the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. So it's a pretty cool plant, and I think it's also indicative of the kind of resilience and tenacity of our plants being able to grow in these difficult environments. Oh, okay, wait a minute. I think I missed something out. I did. Oh, sorry. Okay. I meant to, yes, before I showed that cute picture next. So people tend to overlook plants, not just the kids in that survey. A lot of people overlook plants. So much so, this tendency to overlook plants is so widespread that a couple of biologists, Elizabeth Schussler and James Wandersee, coined a term for it in 1998. They called it plant blindness. And they described it as the inability to notice plants in one's own environment. And the next picture, how many of you see the dog first? Well, it is a very cute dog. He isn't with us anymore. But he's taking up less than 10% of the picture. That's a gorgeous wet meadow. There's camassia, there's bistorte, there's some buttercups in there. But yet we see the dog. And part of this reason is the human brain is apparently wired to see things that move. We cannot process all of the visual information that we get right away, so we tend to ignore some of the inanimate bits, the bits that aren't moving, and we often disregard the non-essential stationary green elements that are in the background. But the problem with plant blindness is it does actually matter. And today, one of our challenges as the Native Plant Society, I think, is combating plant blindness. It's helping people to connect with plants, to understand their role of native plants, well, of all plants, but particularly native plants, in local ecosystems. One of the reasons it matters is that a reduced appreciation of plants and their roles in human ecosystems and human survival, because without plants we have no food and no oxygen, is that people have little disregard for their destruction. They don't care when we build over vast areas. And often in urban areas, people just think of them as weeds. They're not the pretty plants in our gardens, they're weeds. And plant blindness is going to hinder efforts to protect flora, which leads, say, not only to the destruction of habitats, but the loss of the organisms that depend on the plants. And plants make up roughly 50, this is from 2011, these figures. Plants make up roughly 57% of endangered species, yet receive only about 4% of endangered species funding. And say, I did double check this morning, and yes, that was a US stuff in 2011. So this is a problem. Say, we're losing biodiversity, but we're not doing much to protect it. Loss of cultural knowledge. Say, as we saw from those stats earlier, the younger generation are losing the ability to identify plants, even to be aware of them, including those that might be important for their cultural identity. Our local indigenous tribes, I mean, if the young children can't identify the plants that are used in some of the ceremonies and things like that, and for traditional medicines. We lose when we can't identify and when we don't see the plants. And it's also leading to a deficit in science education. The number of courses available are considerably less than 50 years ago when I did my degree. And it leads to a decline in plant science research. And some of that applied research is really important for agricultural and medicinal advancement, and also for restoration. When we think of the area we live in with wildfires and other damage, restoring those habitats is important. More than 28,000 plant species are used medicinally, including plant-deprived anti-cancer drugs and blood thinners. So when we lose our connection, we lose some of that knowledge. And conservation. The bottom line is, at least in my opinion, you don't fight for what you don't love. So trying to connect people with plants, understand their role, and get them to love them means that they will be looking out for the environment. So what we do as the Native Plant Society to try to connect people with plants, we do a whole variety of things. Newsletters. Up here we've got the original first newsletter, which, let's see, Jerry probably did some of this. He was the field trip leader. This was done they used to do it on a mimeograph. And once they'd printed off the mimeograph, then they had to get people together to staple them, to then fold them, staple them again, and then put the mailing label on and get them to the post office. Nowadays, this is an article from one of our recent newsletters. Nowadays, our editor produces them online, and a couple of years ago, we stopped mailing them out. We're trying to save paper, so they're emailed to our members. We also post them on our website right away so that people can have access. We have members from all different backgrounds. We do have plant professionals, but we have hikers, gardeners, photographers, hobby botanists, all sorts of different people. So newsletters are a great way to provide diverse information. We have book reviews, we have personal stories, conservation news, book and more. We have, all sorts of fun stuff. Say Jerry had actually just found a new plant, so that's what that one was, but it varies. Another thing we do is we have programs. We actually had our meeting last night, and our meeting last night was given by Corey King, who is the nursery manager for the Conservation Nursery in Washoe Valley, where they grow native plants for restoration and for selling to individuals. And for those of you who are looking for native plants for your garden, they now sell to anyone. There used to be restrictions on where you lived and how big your plot was. Now anyone can buy native plants from the state tree nurseries, say one in Washoe and one in Vegas. Which is cool. We hold 7 meetings a year, and topics vary. This one was given by one of our grant recipients. We give up to 2 grants a year for research into basic botanical research and increasing of our understanding of Nevada's plants, both native and naturalized. And one of the things our grant recipient has to do, they either give a program or they write an article for the newsletter. As far as meetings go, we really benefited from COVID, because prior to COVID, we just had our in-person meetings, one in Reno and down in the south. COVID, we went to Zoom. We continue. We do hybrid meetings now with in-person in Reno and in Vegas, in Henderson, actually, and also via Zoom, so we can reach all parts of the state, and we do have members from other states as well. We recently got a YouTube channel, and we upload our programs to the YouTube channel within a couple of weeks of them going out. Field trips. Field trips have been important since the beginning. Say the first one was held less than a month after the first meeting of the Native Plant Society. And that very first one on May 3rd, 1975, had 25 people. Our trips vary in location and length. Some of them are going to look for a specific plant or group of plants. Some of them are to see an interesting habitat. Some following a local trail. They do vary. And this summer we're excited to have our first overnight field trip since COVID. and that's scheduled for sometime in June. And I have to admit, I can't remember the exact date. We obviously got some publicity. This photograph was taken, it was in the Reno Gazette Journal in 1998. And Gary, the leader who is no longer with us, was a wonderful person, and I'm glad I got to meet him. And he was a fabulous photographer, and many of his native plant photos are used by the USDA and other people to illustrate some of the plants. This one was taken last year. This was in search of a specific plant. We were looking for Churchill Narrows buckwheat. It's endemic to Nevada. Not only is it endemic to Nevada, it only grows in the Pine Mountains in the Churchill Narrows near to the Fort Churchill State Historic Park. And if you look, we're well and truly bundled up, hats, gloves, some people, because we go out irrespective of the weather. It's probably only dangerous thunderstorms would stop us going out, or really bad smoke days. We are hardy people. There's no such thing as bad weather, it's just the wrong clothes. Maybe it's because I'm a Brit, I think that. If we didn't like going out in rain in England, we'd never go out. It can take us a while to get away from where we park. I like this little rhyme. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. If you want to go very slow and not very far, go with botanists. You can see where we parked. And in fact, in the Reno Gazette article from 1998 that Gary was photographed in, he reminisced about a field trip that didn't cover 200 yards in 3 hours. But he commented, "But what a great trip it was." Maybe one of the reasons that people think Nevada's lacking in floral diversity is because many of our plants are very small. We lovingly call them belly plants, because you really do have to get down on your belly to appreciate them. And I chose these photos because people use different ways of trying to indicate the size. This photograph, actually taken by one of our members, was on iNaturalist, which is a citizen science project where you can upload observations and people identify them. And I know scientists do go into there looking for organisms, plants, animals, and their distribution. And Blake did comment that it was a standard size sour gummy worm to show how small the plant is. This little monkey flower, I sometimes take my wedding ring off. I think there's 2, if not 3 plants within that wedding ring. They are tiny, they are super cute. And of course, a finger always works to show how tiny they are. Professionals use rulers, they measure in centimeters. I do have a ruler, but sometimes you forget it or in a hurry and you just pop your finger there or something. But they really are tiny, and we really do get down on our hands and knees or our bellies to take photographs and close-ups of these plants. I'm not quite sure what Mike was photographing on his back, but he's down there, probably looking up into I think it was a fritillaria, and he was looking up into the bell. It's a bell flower, so he was looking up to get the floral parts. In addition to programs and field trips and meetings, we do go to outreach events. When we're invited to places, I was touched to be invited here to be able to share stories about our native plants and what we do. Outreach events. Reno Earth Day is one we go to. It's a very long day, but it's great because it gives us a chance to talk to people who might not come to events like this that have got plants in the name and try and share some information. Tomorrow, we're going to be at the May Arboretum plant sale. A couple of years ago, they invited us there, and we do sell some native plants. Wrong way. This gentleman, John Weiser, has grown over 200 plants, mainly from seed and cuttings. We also have plants that get transplanted from our garden and things like that so that people can get native plants. Say that, as I said, the Washoe Tree Nursery is also now selling to people because those people who want to incorporate native plants in their yards do find it difficult to source them because you can't go to Moana Nursery or other garden centers easily and find many native plants. And we're going to be down in Walker Basin. I believe they're going to be one of your speakers next month. We're going to be down at their plant sale in May, not selling plants because they're selling plants, but talking about the Native Plant Society and trying to get people interested. Gardening. Gardening is a big deal. Gardening with native plants is really becoming something people are interested in, partly from the work of Doug Tallamy, showing that native plants support so many more native insects than our introduced plants do, and those insects are so important. Most baby birds have to have insects to grow. I mean, the adults enjoy the bird food we put out, but the babies require insects. So we do need to have plants and allow insects in our garden. People are really interested in pollinator habitats, and I think that gardening for pollinators is kind of the gateway drug to ecosystem gardening and thinking about ecosystems, because you can't just plant the zinnias and the petunias for the adults. You have to plant the milkweeds and the other native plants, because so many of the caterpillars and juvenile stages are picky eaters and will only develop on the plants they co-evolved with. We're trying to support this in a variety of ways. In fact, some of our southern members tomorrow have opportunity to visit Song Dog Nursery, which is the restoration nursery down by Lake Mead. Some of our members have been mentoring local master gardeners. The local master gardeners maintain the pollinator gardens at UNR, and some of our members have been mentoring them, teaching them, okay, this little thing's a weed, no, that's good, how to grow stuff from seed, how to propagate, how to care for plants, when to deadhead them, and things like that. We have some resources up in the resources section of our website. We're talking about, in our newsletters this year, we're having a profiled plant that with something that's suitable for the home landscape, and I think we're having a book review on ecosystem gardening book and things like that. But this picture, blog posts, we're going to pop some blog posts on the website too, but this picture is John's garden, the guy who grew all the ones for the sale tomorrow, in Sparks. It's a small suburban garden in Sparks, and it's got over 200 different taxa of plants there, and he very kindly opens it for people to go to. And you do not have to be a member. You can come on our field trips, go to our meetings, and go to our events without being a member, because we want to spread the love. So we don't want to say, no, only members can come. And this garden will be open on Sunday, May 31st. This year, if you want to come out and see his gorgeous garden. Contains a lot of Nevada native plants, and he's a very avid rock gardener. So some plants are not from Nevada, most of them are from the West, though. And of course, social media is important. You can't get away without social media. We have a Facebook page, and actually we have nearly 4,000 followers, which is great to see how that's grown, because then you're getting people, it might come across their feed. They might not be searching for native plants and might see something they like and read. One of the things we do is a plant of the week every week, and give a little bit of information about that. We also share information about our events and other events around the state, and we even share job openings and grant start opportunities and things like that. We do have a presence on Instagram. I have to admit, I do the Facebook page, which I'm much more comfortable with than Instagram, but we have an Instagram page, and it's coming, and say our YouTube channel too, for our recordings of our meetings. And this slide shows an example of a project an online project we did last year to celebrate our 50th anniversary. This is from the iNaturalist website, and they do things called BioBlitzes. And in a BioBlitz, you're recording everything you see in a certain period of time. We limited it to plants, but made it for the whole month. And there were nearly 14,000 observations of plants uploaded to iNaturalist during that month, 1,000 different species. 859 people had uploaded observations, and thankfully, we had some 462 people who helped identify them. Say, I do iNaturalist, I put a bird up, and within a few minutes, or maybe a couple of hours, someone has either agreed or disagreed with my identification of the bird. You put a plant up, and it might sit there for a while until some scientist is interested in it, or one of your fellow people. But it is a really good citizen science platform. So if you go out and take pictures of nature, it doesn't have to be plants. It's something you might want to consider, because I do know scientists use it, including our botanists at the Nevada Division of Natural Heritage. They'll look at it for distribution purposes and other purposes. Conservation. say it's right there in our purpose to get that awareness and appreciation, but also to help with the preservation. And we've been trying to support plants, since 1978. According to the Nevada Division of Natural Heritage, over 600 of Nevada's plants are endangered and threatened maybe with extinction. Of those, 12 were already on the federal list of endangered and threatened species, and there are 13 more considered in danger of extinction in Nevada and on the state's list, which is maintained by the state forester. So we co-sponsored the first workshop to identify which plants were threatened and rare in 1978, and we continue to co-host with the Nevada Division of Natural Heritage. And we have, in fact, one of our board positions is Rare Plant Chair. And our most recent meeting was held in March. Some of the common threats to our plants include groundwater pumping, mining, grazing, off-road vehicle recreation, solar, not only the solar panels, but also all of the hardware and stuff that goes with it, the great big plant, subdivisions and the great big lines and things like that. What else? Housing, obviously, geothermal energy causes problems in some areas, housing and urban development and invasive species. So our plants do face a lot of threats. And what we have here, this is the Ash Meadows sunray. And if you listen to NPR, other stuff, they've been talking about the Ash Meadows pupfish. Ash Meadows, which is down in southern Nevada, close to the California border, is a very special ecosystem. It has about 50 plus springs, seeps, and wetlands. Some people call it the Galapagos of the Mojave. There's at least 26 endemic species, plants and animals together, that only grow in ash meadows because it is such a special ecosystem. And the plants there, this particular one, is facing multiple threats, including groundwater pumping, and also infrastructure development. I was saying about solar, the Green Link project is having to go through the edge of some of that area and things like that. Las Vegas bear poppy. Las Vegas, it's close to Las Vegas, so it's threatened by rapid urban expansion. Also gypsum mining. The thing about many of our rare plants is that they grow in they've adapted to grow into some of our complex soils. And these complex soils also, produce minerals and stuff that we want. So gypsum mining, urban expansion, and also off-road recreation. People seem to like making new trails. And the third one we have here is the team buckwheat. And again, that's been in the news quite a bit because that's threatened by the Rhyolite Ridge lithium mine. And people might say, well, there's just a few, particularly the buckwheat. I think it's 40 acres or something. Does it matter? Yes, it does matter, because as you can see, these plants aren't growing in lush meadows with masses of plants. They're growing in fairly sparse areas. There are insects that depend on them. There are other animals that depend on them. Once we start losing some of these native plants, we are damaging the foundation of local ecosystems. We're reducing biodiversity, insect populations, and all the things on the food web that go on. And in addition to our to the rare plant meetings, we do share conservation news in our websites, and we'll share stuff on our social media and on our website. And we do have a person who's got called a conservation chair. And that person will also write letters during comment periods for legislation and permitting. And we write positive letters as well as negative ones. It's not all negative. There are things that we applaud as well as things that we say, please don't do that. Been lucky enough to do some guest appearances last year. I recorded a, podcast. And Chris Orr came out, and the Wild Nevada film crew, and they came out and they filmed with Janelle. She's down on the ground. She's a local botanist and one of our past presidents. And I think Chris Orr was expecting us to be seeing mule ears and lupins and big things. And she was really quite intrigued by some of the smaller plants we were finding growing under the sagebrush as well as the shrubs within the sagebrush. We have a website, nvnps.org. Under the publication section, you're going to find current newsletters, and we are still in the process of uploading 50 years worth of newsletters. And they used to produce 9 a year. We're down to 6 a year now. Our calendar is kept up to date. So if you do want to find out what outreach events or field trips we're going to do, you can find it on the website. Sometimes the details aren't pulled in until a couple of weeks before about where to meet, but the date and times are definitely in there. Resources, we have links, resources, and other information, and you can join us. I'm nearly done. You know, I found it so hard to choose which pictures to put in because I have a hard disk full of photos of plants, so I thought I'd just stick a few more in. I chose these because they all have fun common names. The elephant head. Can you see you've got the 2 big ears and the trunk? It's called an elephant head. This one was probably taken on the interpretive loop up in Mount Rose because it grows up there and other wetlands around. This one, devil's spine flower, again, I hadn't seen that till this year when I went down to the Mojave. This is it in the spring. It's nice and green, still prickly, but once it dries out, it gets very thorny and hard and goes a dark color. And I'm sure all of you have seen mule ears as you drive around, maybe not in the middle of town, but once you get out of town a little bit, because they're coming into flower now, and with those long leaves, which have got the soft gray hairs on them, that's how they got their common name. If you want to help us spread native plant love, please join us. We are an all-volunteer organization, and our membership fees and donations help pay for our grants, our website, our outreach fees, etc. And we're only $18 a year. Thank you. Oh, and if you need to contact us, you can either contact us at our official address, or you're welcome to email me directly. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Emma. And we have time for some audience questions now. We have some microphones available for you so that we can capture your question as part of the recording of today's program. Mm-hmm.
And it may be because I'm prejudiced because I have lots of allergies, but isn't sagebrush an invasive plant? It seems to take over, though, fields.
It does, because it's well adapted. No, the sagebrush steppe is actually a very important ecosystem. There's over 350 species, plants and animals, that depend on it, and it extends beyond Nevada. So, no, it's not invasive, and so it's actually our state plant and has been since 1917. And you might hear people trying to save it because of things like the greater sage grouse and stuff can only survive in the sagebrush, and the pygmy rabbit and various other things.
And the same for rabbitbrush?
Rabbitbrush is, again, another native plant that is important, and say very important for pollinators because it's flowering late in the year. Often it's their last chance to get, nectar and pollen before they either overwinter or migrate.
I'm going to go out on a limb right now and think, I assume the team buckwheat is named after Jerry?
Yes.
Did you discover it? Fantastic. I just think that's marvelous. I've known the name and I have not met you, but please, I'm really disappointed about what's going on down there. It's one of our favorite places to go visit. And what is the status right now? Do you mind if I ask between Rhyolite Ridge and Team Buckwheat?
As far as I know, the whole thing's on hold still. They've been sued, or BLM is sued over allowing the mine to proceed. I think that's where it is now.
Yes, they've got permission to proceed, but they lost some of their funding, some of their private funding, so I think that's also contributing to it being on hold, and there are various litigations going on. And that is actually 8. Have you got 8 things named for you now, Jerry?
Yes.
It's up to 8. 8 team plants.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about the invasive word and related to native plants. I know, like, a thistle is native here, but some people, oh, it's a weed. As it relates to conservation, perhaps, how that plant blindness is related. Or is that, sorry, that was the
Well,
term
I
plant blindness.
think that the plant blindness in some ways is related because we have lost contact with what our native plants are. Now, I am what I call a hobby botanist. Obviously, I know a bit. Invasive plants are a threat. We have some lovely native thistles, but there's some horrible non-native thistles. Bromus tectorum, cheatgrass, is one of our big invasive plants and a big problem. And how it threatens, one of the ways in which it threatens native plants is it's a winter annual, so it comes up really early. It is absorbing, getting the water from the thing, whereas some of the native plants are slower. And once you get a lot of cheatgrass in there, then it's crowding out some of the natives that might be a bit slower to come up, some of the native annuals. And of course, also once it dries out early, it takes one spark to ignite it, and we get caught in this whole fire cycle, which is why research into restoration and understanding our ecosystems to be able to restore them post-fire is very important. Do you have anything to add, Jerry? Okay.
I just wanted to say last year when I went to different nurseries to find native plants, they all looked at me like they didn't know what I was talking about. And when I went to Moana Nursery a couple of weeks ago, they have a labeled section that says native plants, and they had about 5, but it's a start.
It is a start, and also they do at least bring in neonicotinoid-free plants, because that is another issue. Neonicotinoids are the pesticides that are within the plant, so that, then you get the plant itself and its fruits and things like that might not be palatable to insects, and we need insects. We absolutely need insects. Some of the big nurseries, like the walnuts and different things, will call things native, because of course every plant's native to somewhere. It's a question of whether it's native to this region or the region you're gardening in. But there is an increase, say the Washoe Conservation Nursery in Eastlake has opened up to sell to everyone. The Walker Basin Conservancy, they are having a plant sale at the end of May. They're down in Smith Valley, and I know last year they brought some of their plants up to different places in Reno and around the place they're growing. They mainly grow for restoration, but they want to get plants into the hands of home gardeners, because Talamy reckons we need to get 30 to 40% of our garden, hopefully native, to support, the wildlife and the insects, and be messy gardeners. Messy gardening is a thing these days. Don't cut everything down early in the spring and make it tidy, because then you're destroying where some of the insects and things overwinter.
Emma, my thoughts about sagebrush and rabbitbrush being invasive, yeah, they kind of are, because that's their job, to spread and have, establish themselves on our lands. But we have an acre out in Spanish Springs, and I just go out there and pull them up. If they're not where I want them to be, and they're fairly easy to control. If I want sagebrush in the back, that's fine. I'll leave it back there. And there's no weeds back there because it's it's always been sagebrush there. And the weeds don't readily take in there. The, what do I want to say? The cheatgrass. Cheatgrass doesn't take seed back there. Or the Russian thistle.
Oh, yes, the Russian thistles.
Yeah, those don't grow back there either. So if you have space, you can leave some sagebrush. That's great. If it wants to grow in your landscaping, just pull them out. And they're not, I admit I don't leave rabbit brush in most of my landscape because it wants all of its children around it. It wants all of its family, and it's not happy unless it has many other little rabbit brush growing around it. So I do take them out because they'll take over my landscape.
That's a really good point. And what the word I like to use for the natives that are aggressive is thugs, because they're thugs. Yeah, they will populate, it's their job, but they are important. An invasive species, as far as I'm aware, there's different definitions for it, but it's a non-native species that is going to cause detrimental environmental and economic impacts, is, I think, one of the definitions for invasive species. But yeah, native plants can be thugs. They can, and I also am in the sagebrush, not in Spanish Springs, but on Mount Rose. And yeah, I pull them up. And in fact, there's some sagebrush for sale at May Arboretum tomorrow that I transplanted because some people last year were wanting to find it. And Corey King from Washoe Nursery was saying it's one of the plants that they have a lot of demand for, because people who do have large acreage want it for the very reason you have it. And our quail love it. We have quite a lot of California quail, and they're out there underneath the sagebrush.
So while mining hurts native plants, do you anticipate things like data centers harming the ecosystem even more for native plants?
I don't know enough of the stats, but yes, they're going to with the infrastructure and the development, but I understand most of them require a lot of water, and obviously water in Nevada is a big issue. And many of the plants, we have obvious wetlands that we can see. There's a lot of underground water in Nevada, and plants depend on that, and when you start pumping that water out, you are damaging those ecosystems. So I'm sure it will.
I'm assuming that the Ash Meadows is not surrounded by water. Could you just list how is it managed to be isolated and maintain 50 distinct species?
I don't know enough about the geology, but for hundreds of thousands of years, there's underground water there, there's seeps, there are some oases there, gorgeous ponds and streams, but a lot of it's underground water from thousands of years ago, and it's also got these alkaline soils, so it's a very special habitat. And that's why you've got 26, at least, different species of plants and animals that have kind of remained a remnant of an ecosystem that only grow there, that underground water and those alkaline soils.
Thank you, Emma. I also have a question. I wondered if you could talk some about how when people plant native plants, what the soil requirements are like. You talk some about the unique soils in Nevada that allow for unique species to develop.
Well, trying to grow those plants elsewhere is a problem, and there's quite a lot of research being done into doing that to see if they can save some of the plants like teak buckwheat by growing them elsewhere and then transplanting them. But for your native backyard, what I do is I make sure, I got a nice hole, I make sure it's wet. I do not add organic matter. I do not add fertilizer. If anything, depending on what kind of plant it is, I might even put a bit of DG or something like that in to make sure the drainage is good, because a lot of the plants that are growing in the Great Basin area of Reno, once they're established, they really don't want to be sitting in wet. So if anything, it's, Don't overfeed them, don't baby them. They might do well for a couple of years, but then they might just poop out. And also allow time. If you're putting in a smaller plant, it takes a little while to get established. I know I'll be buying some plants tomorrow, the little 2.5-inch pot ones. What I will probably do is plant them on into slightly bigger pots for during the summer, because I find it easier to control the moisture level there. And then in the fall, I'll plant them out into the garden. And I do try to get some stuff from seed. Mind you, I think the quail mainly eat it, but the best time for seeding is actually in the fall, because a lot of our native seeds need a period of cold, of stratification. So if you plant in the fall before the snow, or maybe if we have a little January or February warm-up, you can still plant then. They get that cold period, the ground is damper, they're more likely to establish.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and please join me in thanking Emma for her presentation today.